Welcome back to Sarah Werewolf Romance Collection, where the alphas are dangerous and the heroines always bite back. Quick question for the pack before we dive into today's chaos. Where are you listening from right now? Let me know in the comments, and drop an otter emoji if you think a cute pet makes every dangerous situation better. Today we have a special one. It's funny, it's tense, and it involves a catastrophic royal wedding and a bodyguard who decides the best way to save the king is to tackle him to the floor. But before we start, if you want to support the channel and get early access to stories like this, hit that join button down below. It helps us keep the lights on and the stories coming. Now, take a deep breath, check your drink for poison, the wedding is off, and the hunt is on. Let's read. Chapter 1. The grand hall smelled of desperation and expensive lilies. Rhea Valeria adjusted the collar of her stiff server's uniform, her hazel eyes scanning the perimeter with the mechanical precision of a radar sweep. To the 300 guests, she was invisible. Just another member of the catering staff ensuring the champagne flutes remained full. To the threat assessment running constantly in her brain, everyone was a potential variable in a catastrophic equation. She tapped her right thigh, a nervous tick. Beneath the cheap polyester trousers of her uniform, a ceramic knife was strapped to her leg, undetectable by the venue's metal detectors. "Table 4 needs water," the catering manager hissed, passing her. Rhea ignored him, her gaze fixed on the altar. Standing there was Alpha King Darius Valerius. Even from this distance, the man was a monolith. 6'6", dark skin scarred from wars Rhea had only read about in classified files, and a shaved head that gleamed under the chandeliers. He didn't look like a groom. He looked like a prisoner awaiting execution. He rubbed his sternum absent-mindedly, a gesture of chronic, crushing stress. Rhea moved along the periphery, carrying a tray of empty glasses she had no intention of filling. She wasn't here for the king. She was here because the catering company had flagged a security concern regarding the wine shipment, and she was the freelancer they called when they wanted problems to disappear without police reports. "Pip, stay," she whispered. A soft, chittering vibration answered against the back of her neck. Pip, her Asian small-clawed otter, was curled tightly inside her messy, oversized bun, hidden beneath a hairnet. He was warm, a grounding weight in the chaos. The ceremony reached its crescendo. The bride, a woman named Lady Vieira, looked beautiful in ivory silk, but her pulse was visible in her throat from 20 feet away. Fear? Excitement? Rhea inhaled deeply, separating the olfactory data. Expensive perfume, sweat, the salty tang of the ocean breeze coming off the king. Then, the high priest poured the ceremonial wine into the golden chalice. The scent hit Rhea's nose instantly, cutting through the floral arrangements and the humidity. It wasn't just wine. Beneath the heavy notes of fermented grapes, there was a sharp, bitter undercurrent of almonds, followed by an acrid singe that reminded her of battery acid. Cyanide. And something else. Something ancient and earthy. Wolfsbane. Rhea stopped moving. Her heart rate didn't spike. It leveled out, cold and steady. Calculations flashed through her mind. Distance to altar, 30 yards. Obstacles, 3 rows of pews, 2 guards, 1 priest. Time until consumption, 4 seconds. Darius accepted the chalice. His hand was steady, but his eyes were dead. He lifted the golden cup, the liquid sloshing near the rim. "Do you, Darius Valerius, take this woman," the priest droned. Rhea didn't wait for the vow. She didn't shout a warning. Words took too long to process. She dropped the tray. The crash of shattering glass was the starter pistol. She sprinted. Her boots, reinforced for traction, gripped the polished marble floor. She vaulted the first pew, ignoring the gasps of the nobility. A guard stepped out, hand reaching for his sword. Rhea didn't slow down. She slid under his reach, using her momentum to kick the back of his knee, sending him buckling, and scrambled back to her feet without losing speed. Darius had the cup to his lips. The liquid touched his beard. Rhea launched herself off the step of the dais, her body a projectile aimed squarely at the king of werewolves. Chapter 2. The impact was like hitting a concrete wall. Rhea slammed into Darius's chest with every ounce of momentum she had generated. The collision knocked the air from her lungs, but physics was on her side. The sheer, unexpected force of the tackle sent the massive Alpha King toppling backward. The golden chalice flew from his hand. It spun through the air in a glittering arc before smashing against the stone floor of the altar. They landed hard. Rhea took the brunt of the fall, her elbows cracking against the stone as she landed atop the king, her legs tangling with his massive limbs. For a second, the entire hall was silent, suspended in shock. Then, the sound of sizzling broke the trance. Where the wine had splashed across the marble, the stone was foaming. White smoke hissed upward, eating into the rock with a corrosive hunger. The acrid stench of burning limestone and concentrated wolfsbane filled the immediate vicinity, choking the air. "Get off him!" The shriek came from Lady Vieira. Chaos erupted. The metallic shing of 24 swords being drawn rang out. "Assassin!" someone screamed. Rhea scrambled to her knees, straddling the king's chest, her hand instantly going to the ceramic knife on her thigh. She didn't draw it yet. She just needed to know it was there. Darius lay beneath her, dazed. His dark eyes were wide, staring up at her. He blinked, his pupils constricting as he processed the woman currently pinning him to the ground. He inhaled, his nostrils flaring. Rhea froze. She knew what he smelled. The residue of the firing range on her stiff server's blazer. Gunpowder. The wild honey shampoo she used. And the undeniable scent of the adrenaline coursing through her. "Traitors!" Lady Vieira screamed again, pointing a trembling finger at Rhea. "She attacked the king! Kill her!" 3 royal guards surged forward, their blades gleaming. Rhea braced herself, shifting her weight to spring, but a massive hand clamped onto her shoulder. It wasn't an attack, it was an anchor. "Halt!" The voice rolled out of Darius's chest like a thunderclap, vibrating through Rhea's own ribs. The command was infused with alpha authority, a sonic force that made the guards freeze mid-step. Darius didn't look at the guards. He turned his head slowly to the side, looking at the sizzling, smoking ruin of the floor where the wine had landed. If he had swallowed even a mouthful, his throat would have dissolved before he hit the ground. He looked back at Rhea. His expression wasn't angry. It was one of profound, exhausted fascination. He reached up, his thumb brushing a smudge of spilled wine from his cheek, dangerously close to his eye. He sniffed it, confirming the almond scent. "Wolfsbane," he rumbled, his voice rough. "And accelerated acid." He looked at Rhea, really looked at her, noting the tactical stance, the clear eyes, the lack of fear. He realized in that second that his own elite guard had stood by while he was nearly liquidated, and this tiny, chaotic stranger had been the only one to move. "Finally," Darius groaned, letting his head thump back against the stone floor. "Competence." Chapter 3. The relief lasted exactly 3 seconds. A sharp thwip sound cut through the air, followed by the dull thud of an arrow embedding itself in the stone inches from Darius's ear. "Move!" Rhea didn't ask. She commanded. She grabbed the lapels of Darius's obscurely expensive suit and yanked. The king was heavy, a solid mass of muscle and bone, but adrenaline gave Rhea the leverage she needed. She rolled off him, dragging him sideways just as a second arrow shattered the spot where his chest had been. "Gallery!" Rhea shouted, pointing upward. High above the altar, in the shadowed choir loft, silhouettes were moving. Crossbows. Darius tried to rise, but he stumbled, his legs folding beneath him like wet cardboard. He coughed, a wet, hacking sound. "The fumes!" Rhea cursed, ducking under his arm to support his weight. "You inhaled the vapor. It's a paralytic agent mixed with the acid." "I can fight," Darius slurred, his words thick, his eyes losing focus. "You can't even stand, Your Highness. Walk or I drag you." Lady Vieira, the weeping bride, suddenly stopped crying. With a snarl that distorted her beautiful features, she reached into the folds of her ruined wedding dress and pulled out a serrated dagger. She lunged at them, aiming for Darius's exposed neck. Rhea's hands were full, holding the king upright. She couldn't draw her knife in time. "Pip! Face!" Rhea yelled. The messy bun on top of Rhea's head exploded. Pip, the Asian small-clawed otter, launched himself like a furry, indignant missile. He glided through the air and latched onto Lady Vieira's face, his small paws gripping her nose and ears. Vieira shrieked, dropping the dagger and flailing at the creature, screeching and scrambling over her eyes. "Good boy!" Rhea grunted. She heaved Darius forward, his arm draped over her shoulders, his weight nearly crushing her. "Let's go!" She whistled sharply. Pip abandoned the bride's face, bounced off her shoulder, and scurried across the floor, leaping back onto Rhea's shoulder as she ran. They scrambled behind the heavy oak altar, just as a volley of bolts turned the wood into a pincushion. The main doors were blocked by confused guests and closing guards who didn't know who to attack. "Service exit," Rhea panted, dragging Darius toward the small door behind the choir stand. "Kitchen staff use it." Darius was trying to help, his legs churning sluggishly, but he was dead weight. "Who are you?" he wheezed, his head lolling. "Expensive," Rhea snapped. They reached the heavy iron-bound door. Rhea shoved the handle. Locked. She rattled it. Locked from the outside. A setup. They were being corralled into the kill zone. Behind them, the footsteps of the assassins pounded on the marble. They had seconds before they were cornered. Chapter 4. Rhea didn't waste time cursing. She dropped Darius against the stone wall. He slid down, looking dazed and furious, and swung her battered leather satchel, the kit, off her shoulder. "Cover your ears," she ordered. She ripped open the bag. Inside, nestled between litmus strips and duct tape, was a small tin of what looked like breath mints. She popped the lid, grabbed a small gray putty ball, plastic explosive molded around a blasting cap, and jammed it into the keyhole of the iron door. She shoved a detonator pin into the putty, grabbed Darius by the collar, and dragged him behind a stone pillar. 3, 2, boom! The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Dust and stone chips rained down. The heavy door groaned and swung inward, hanging by a single twisted hinge. "Up!" Rhea yelled. The adrenaline spike seemed to clear Darius's head momentarily. He roared, forcing his paralyzed muscles to obey, and stumbled through the smoke after her. They burst out into the cool evening air of the loading dock. The catering vans were parked there, but Rhea ignored them. She ran toward the far end of the lot where a sleek silver shape gleamed under the security lights. The Audi RS6 Avant. She hit the unlock button on her fob as they ran. The lights flashed a welcoming orange. Darius, acting on pure alpha instinct, staggered toward the driver's side door. "I drive," he grunted, reaching for the handle. Rhea didn't argue. She shoved him, hard. Caught off balance, the massive king stumbled backward. Before he could recover, she opened the passenger door and shoved him inside. "Get in, Your Highness, or die here!" she shouted. Darius blinked, stunned by the manhandling, and fell into the bucket seat. Rhea slammed the door, sprinted around the hood, and vaulted into the driver's seat. She hit the ignition button. The twin-turbo V8 roared to life, a deep, guttural growl that rivaled any wolf. "Buckle up," she said, shifting into gear. The rear loading gate was closing. Security was locking down the perimeter. A heavy yellow barrier arm was descending across the exit ramp. Rhea didn't touch the brakes. She stomped on the accelerator. The Audi surged forward, 600 horsepower planting them back in their leather seats. "The gate!" Darius warned, bracing his hands against the dashboard. "German engineering," Rhea muttered. She aimed for the hinge mechanism, the weakest point. The silver station wagon collided with the barrier arm. There was a sickening crunch of fiberglass and metal, the windshield spiderwebbed on the passenger side, but the barrier snapped cleanly off its housing. They shot out of the palace grounds, debris trailing behind them, tearing onto the highway and vanishing into the flow of evening traffic before the alarms could fully sound. Rhea checked the rearview mirror. No pursuit yet. She exhaled, her hands trembling slightly on the leather steering wheel. Beside her, Darius stared at her, his breathing ragged. He reached up and pulled a piece of yellow plastic debris out of his collar. "You destroyed the gate," he said, his voice level. "I'll add it to the bill," Rhea said, her eyes glued to the road. Chapter 5. The silence inside the Audi RS6 was heavy, broken only by the hum of the tires on the asphalt and the wind whistling through the spider-webbed cracks of the passenger side windshield. Rhea drove with white-knuckled precision, taking the station wagon off the main highway and onto a series of gravel logging roads that wound deep into the Blackwood Ridge. Beside her, King Darius was a mountain of slumping, expensive fabric. The wolfsbane fumes had done their work. His limbs were heavy, his breathing shallow and rhythmic, like a machine running on reserve power. He wasn't unconscious, but he was trapped in his own body, his alpha physiology warring with the paralytic agent. "Turn left," he mumbled, his voice thick. "Pack territory. North." "We aren't going to your territory," Rhea said, her eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. "That's the first place they'll look. We're going to the one place nobody knows about because it doesn't exist on any map." She pulled the car off the gravel track and into a dense thicket of pines. The Audi's suspension absorbed the bumps as she navigated a hidden trail, finally coming to a stop in front of a small, weathered A-frame cabin. It looked abandoned, covered in moss and shadows. Rhea killed the engine. "End of the line. Get out." Darius fumbled with the door handle. His fingers, usually capable of crushing bone, slipped uselessly over the latch. He snarled, a low, frustrated sound in his throat. Rhea sighed. She exited the car, walked around, and yanked his door open. "Come on, Your Highness, lean on me." He all but fell out of the car, his massive frame colliding with her. He smelled of sweat, burnt cedar, and the cloying sweetness of the ceremonial wine. Rhea grunted under the weight but didn't buckle. She hooked an arm around his waist, dragging him toward the dark cabin. "Pip?" she called out softly. The passenger door of the Audi clicked open, and the small otter scurried out, chittering anxiously as he followed them, his claws clicking on the wooden porch steps. Rhea propped Darius against the doorframe. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a small lancet from her kit, and pricked her finger. She smeared a single drop of crimson blood on the door's threshold. The sanctuary rule. The air shimmered briefly, a magical ward recognizing the owner. Warded, Darius rasped, impressed despite his delirium. Standard industry practice, Rhea muttered. She tried the handle. It turned, but the door didn't budge. Right, the lock. She didn't use a key. Instead, she leaned back and delivered a sharp, calculated kick to the wood right next to the deadbolt. The door swung open with a groan of protest. You kicked it in, Darius observed, stumbling inside as she guided him to a dusty leather sofa. I lost the key 3 months ago, Rhea admitted, locking the door behind them by jamming a heavy chair under the handle. The mechanism was busted from her previous entry. I keep meaning to fix it. She left him on the couch and immediately stripped off the server's blazer and the cheap polyester trousers. Underneath, she was wearing her real skin, a black tactical tank top that showed off the wiry muscle of her arms, and dark gray cargo pants filled with reinforced pockets. She strapped the ceramic knife back onto her thigh. Darius watched her through heavy eyelids. The fog in his brain was lifting, replaced by a dull, throbbing ache. He looked around the dusty cabin. No servants, no guards, no luxury. Just a small human woman, an otter, and a broken door. You are very small, he murmured, closing his eyes. And you are very heavy, Rhea retorted, tossing a blanket over him. Sleep it off. If you try to leave, the wards will burn you. Chapter 6. Morning light filtered through the dirty windows, illuminating floating dust motes. Darius woke with a gasp, his body jerking upright. The paralysis was gone, replaced by a ravenous hunger and a headache that felt like a drill boring into his temples. He scanned the room. Rhea was sitting at a scratched wooden table, surrounded by the contents of her leather satchel. She was counting bullets, lining them up like toy soldiers. 3 magazines, 12 rounds of hollow points, 6 silver nitrate tips, she muttered, before checking the battery on a small black laser pointer she used to play with Pip. Darius tried to stand. His legs held. He rolled his shoulders, feeling the stiffness, and walked toward her. He felt naked without his guards, without his sword, without the constant noise of the court. On the table, Pip was inspecting a strip of beef jerky. As Darius reached for the food, the otter hissed and clamped his small teeth onto the king's index finger. Ow! Darius yanked his hand back, staring at the creature in disbelief. It bit me. Rhea corrected, not looking up. And that's his breakfast. Yours is in the tin. Darius glared at the otter, then at the woman. I need a phone. I must contact General Kale. The pack needs to know I am alive. No phones, Rhea said, sliding a loaded magazine into her pistol. The signals are triangulated. As soon as you make a call, Malachor will drop a Hellfire missile on this roof. I have my ways, Darius said, his voice dropping an octave. He raised his left hand. The heavy gold signet ring on his finger caught the light. This ring is connected to the Royal Guard's tracking grid. If I activate the distress beacon... Rhea moved faster than he expected. She grabbed a heavy geode rock she used as a paperweight from the table. Don't, Darius started. Crack! Rhea brought the rock down on his hand, or rather, on the ring. Darius pulled back, but she was precise. She smashed the heavy gold band against the table surface, shattering the delicate gemstone setting and crushing the circuitry inside. Are you insane? Darius roared, the alpha command slipping into his voice. The windows rattled. That ring is a homing beacon for the people who just tried to melt your insides, Rhea snapped, standing up to meet his glare. She was a foot shorter than him, but she didn't flinch. I just saved your life. Again. Darius didn't listen. The loss of his link to his kingdom, the poison, the disrespect. It boiled over. He lunged, intending to pin her to the wall to assert dominance, a standard wolf tactic. He grabbed her shoulders, shoving her backward. Rhea didn't resist the push. Instead, she grabbed his wrists, dropped her center of gravity, and stepped into his space. Using his own forward momentum against him, she twisted her hips and threw him. The king of werewolves went airborne. He slammed onto his back on the wooden floorboards, the breath leaving him in a whoosh. Rhea stood over him, breathing hard, her hazel eyes blazing. "Do not touch me." Darius lay there, staring up at the water-stained ceiling. The shock of being manhandled by a human paralyzed him more effectively than the wolfsbane. He felt a strange, electric jolt in his chest, not anger, but something sharper. Adrenaline? Arousal? He let out a low, rough laugh. "You are a very difficult employee." "I'm a consultant," Rhea corrected, offering him a hand up. "And my rates just doubled." Chapter 7. The sun dipped below the tree line, casting long, bruised shadows across the cabin floor. Outside, a summer storm was brewing, the rain beginning to drum rhythmically against the metal roof. Darius sat by the cold fireplace. He knew better than to ask for a fire. Smoke was a signal. He rubbed his sternum, the repetitive motion he had displayed at the altar. Rhea watched him from the kitchen, where she was opening a can of peaches with her combat knife. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "What?" "Your chest. You keep rubbing it." Darius stopped, his hand dropping to his lap. "It is not a pain, it is pressure." He leaned back, the shadows hiding his scarred face. "My father called it the crown's weight. To me, it feels like a boulder. A massive, jagged stone sitting right here." He tapped his chest. "Every breath is a negotiation with gravity. Every meal is a potential execution. Every smile from a courtier is a dagger in a velvet sheath." He looked at her, his eyes weary. "I suspect everyone. My guards, my council, even my own kin. It is exhausting to be the apex predator when the whole jungle is poisonous." Rhea walked over and handed him the tin of peaches. She sat on the floor opposite him, crossing her legs. Pip curled up in her lap, chewing on a dried apricot. "I smelled the almonds," Rhea said quietly. "At the wedding, before anyone else." "Because of your nose," Darius said. "A human with a wolf's senses." "Because I know the smell," she corrected. She pulled down the collar of her tank top, revealing a faint, jagged scar running along her collarbone. 5 years ago, a job in desperate need of discretion. I drank the toast meant for my client. It wasn't wolfsbane. It was arsenic mixed with nightshade. It took me 3 weeks to learn how to walk again. I can smell poison now because my body remembers dying. Darius stared at the scar. It was a thin white line against her olive skin. He felt a sudden, irrational urge to trace it with his thumb. The realization that she carried her own boulder, a rock of trauma and hypervigilance, shifted something between them. "We are a matched set, then," Darius rumbled. "The paranoid king and the broken shield." "I'm not broken," Rhea said sharply. "I'm calibrated." "Agreed." Darius leaned forward, the humor returning to his eyes, though it was darker now. "A truce, Rhea Valyria. Until I have my throne back, I will be the weapon, you be the shield." "Deal," she said. "But the weapon does what the shield says. I'm in charge of security." Darius smirked, a dangerous, handsome expression that finally made him look like a king. "Don't push your luck. little wolf. Chapter 8. By the next afternoon, they were out of food. The jerky was gone, mostly Pip, and the peaches were a memory. "We need supplies," Rhea announced, shrugging into her leather jacket. "And I need a burner phone to check the dark web chatter." "We take the car," Darius said, standing up. He had brushed the dust off his suit, but he still looked like a billionaire who had been dragged through a hedge backward. "The windshield is cracked and the bumper is hanging off," Rhea reminded him. "But it's faster than walking. We'll go to the truck stop on Route 9. It's automatic, no cashiers." They drove in silence, the Audi rattling slightly over the potholes. When they pulled into the dilapidated gas station, Rhea parked behind a dumpster to hide the distinctive silver car. "Stay here," she ordered. "You stick out like a sore thumb." "I can assist," Darius insisted, opening his door. "I am excellent at procurement." Rhea rolled her eyes but didn't stop him. They walked into the small convenience store. The fluorescent lights buzzed like angry hornets. The shelves were half empty, stocked with stale chips and motor oil. Rhea went for the essentials: water, protein bars, a prepaid phone, and a first aid refill. She dumped them on the counter. The teenage clerk, who was watching a video on his phone, didn't even look up. $42.50, the kid mumbled. Rhea patted her pockets. Her wallet was in the glove box. Shoot. "Allow me," Darius said smoothly. He stepped forward, radiating royal charisma. He reached into his pocket and realized, for the second time, that he had no wallet. He hesitated, then unfastened one of his gold cufflinks. He placed the heavy, diamond-encrusted gold piece on the counter. "This should suffice. It is solid 18-karat gold, custom-made by the royal jeweler, valued at roughly 3,000 credits." The clerk looked at the cufflink, then at Darius's ruined suit, then at Rhea. "I can't take jewelry, man. Cash or credit." Darius looked affronted. "This is worth more than your entire establishment." "Sir, this is a gas and go." Rhea shoved Darius aside before he could declare war on the minimum wage worker. "Sorry, my uncle is eccentric." She dug a crumpled $50 bill out of her boot, her emergency stash, and slapped it on the counter. "Keep the change." As she grabbed the bag, the TV mounted in the corner flashed a breaking news banner. "Regicide attempt. King Darius presumed dead." Rhea froze. On the screen, Lady Vieira was standing in front of the palace, looking tearful and perfectly composed. She held a microphone with a trembling hand. "He went mad," Vieira sobbed to the cameras. "He attacked me at the altar. He was raving about shadows. Then, that woman, she kidnapped him. I fear the king has been murdered by his own hired help." The screen flashed a picture of Rhea, a grainy security photo from a previous job. "Wanted, Rhea Valeria, armed and extremely dangerous." The clerk looked up at the TV, then down at Rhea. His eyes went wide. "Run," Rhea said. She grabbed the bag in Darius's arm and they bolted out the door just as the clerk reached for the silent alarm under the counter. Chapter 9. The silver Audi RS6 Avant tore down Route 9, its engine screaming in protest. The needle on the fuel gauge hovered dangerously close to the red line, a blinking reminder of their hasty exit from the gas station. They hadn't refueled. "We have company," Rhea said, her voice devoid of panic, just cold fact. Darius twisted in the passenger seat, ignoring the groan of the leather. Through the spider-webbed cracks of the rear window, he saw them. 2 matte black SUVs, unmarked and aggressive, eating up the asphalt behind them. They weren't police vehicles. They moved with the predatory coordination of a hunting pack. "Mercenaries," Darius growled. "Malakor's private cleaners." "Hold on," Rhea commanded. She yanked the steering wheel hard to the right, sending the heavy station wagon skidding onto a narrow gravel service road that wound up the side of the mountain. The Audi's suspension, already rattling from the logging trails, slammed violently against the chassis. The hanging front bumper scraped against a boulder, tearing off completely with a screech of plastic and metal. "You are dismantling the vehicle!" Darius shouted over the roar of the engine and the pinging of gravel against the undercarriage. "I'm saving your life. Again. Shut up and look for a choke point." The SUVs followed, their suspension better suited for the terrain. A pop, pop, pop sound erupted. Gunfire. The side mirror on Darius's door exploded in a shower of plastic and glass. "They are shooting at us!" Darius roared. "They're trying to blow the tires," Rhea corrected. She drifted around a hairpin turn, the rear wheels kicking up a cloud of dust. "Pip, get down!" The otter, who had been clinging to the headrest, dove into the footwell, chittering angrily. The road narrowed. On one side was a sheer drop into the valley. On the other, a destabilized cliff face held back by rusted chain-link netting. Rhea's hazel eyes flicked to the netting. It was old, the rock behind it loose and eager to fall. "I need the wheel steady," she barked. "Grab it!" Darius didn't hesitate. He reached over, his massive hands clamping onto the steering wheel. "I have it!" Rhea leaned out of her window, the wind whipping her hair. She drew her pistol, the one she'd reloaded in the cabin, and aimed not at the SUVs, but at the rusted anchor bolts holding the chain-link netting in place. She fired 3 times. Ping! 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 The bolts sheared. Gravity took over. "Gun it!" she screamed, pulling herself back inside. Darius slammed his foot on her boot, pressing the accelerator to the floor. The Audi surged forward just as the cliff face gave way. Tons of shale, granite, and debris crashed down onto the road behind them. The lead SUV slammed on its brakes, but it was too late. The landslide swallowed the road, burying the hood of the first vehicle and sending the second one swerving into the ditch to avoid being crushed. Rhea wrestled the wheel back from Darius, fighting to keep the car from spinning out as they cleared the dust cloud. The road behind them was gone, blocked by a wall of rock. That, Darius exhaled, wiping dust from his face, was effective. Rhea didn't celebrate. She stared at the dashboard. The fuel light was solid orange now. "We're not out of it," she said grimly. "We're out of gas, out of road, and you're bleeding." Darius looked down. A shard of glass from the shattered side mirror was embedded deep in his forearm, blood soaking the sleeve of his already ruined suit. Chapter 10. The Audi died 3 miles later. It didn't break down. It simply starved, the engine sputtering and cutting out as they coasted into the mouth of an abandoned mining tunnel Rhea had spotted on the GPS. The silence that followed was heavy, amplified by the dripping water echoing from deep within the mine. It was cool inside, smelling of wet stone and decay. "Out," Rhea said, popping the trunk. She grabbed the kit and the bag of supplies from the gas station. "We can't stay here long, but we need to deal with that arm before you get septic." Darius exited the car, cradling his left arm. The adrenaline of the chase was fading, replaced by the throbbing reality of the injury. He followed her deeper into the tunnel, where an old ventilation shaft provided a sliver of daylight. "Sit," Rhea ordered, pointing to a flat crate. Darius sat. He used his good hand to shrug off the tattered remains of his suit jacket. His dress shirt was stained crimson. He ripped the sleeve off, revealing the jagged shard of glass sticking out of his dark skin. Rhea knelt beside him. She opened her satchel, laying out the tools. Tweezers, a bottle of antiseptic, a needle, and thread. "This is going to sting," she warned. "I have endured torture sessions more painful than a splinter," Darius scoffed, though his jaw tightened. Rhea poured the antiseptic over the wound. Darius hissed, his breath hitching. She didn't pause. With steady, professional hands, she gripped the glass with the tweezers and pulled. The shard came out with a wet slide. Blood welled up, dark and fast. Rhea immediately pressed a gauze pad against it. "Hold this," she instructed. Darius pressed his hand over hers. His palm was warm, rough, and engulfed her smaller hand completely. For a moment, they didn't move. Rhea looked up, meeting his gaze. His eyes were dark, intense, stripping away the layers of her professional detachment. She could smell the sea salt scent of him, mixed with the metallic tang of blood. It was intoxicating. "You are surprisingly gentle," Darius murmured, his voice low, vibrating in the quiet cave. "For an assassin." "Security consultant," she corrected automatically, but her voice lacked its usual bite. She pulled her hand away to thread the needle. "I need to stitch it. Don't move." As she worked, sewing the skin back together, Darius watched her face. He noted the way her brow furrowed in concentration, the stray hairs escaping her messy bun. The proximity was dangerous. He leaned in just an inch, drawn by the scent of wild honey and gunpowder that seemed to cling to her skin. Rhea paused. She looked up, her lips parted slightly. The air between them crackled, a static charge building before the strike. Darius leaned closer. He could see the gold flecks in her hazel eyes. He wanted to bridge the gap, to taste the competence and fire that had kept him alive for the last 48 hours. Then he stopped. He pulled back, clearing his throat and turning his head away. "I cannot afford distractions," he said, his voice stiff. "Not while my throne is usurped." Rhea blinked, the spell breaking. She tied off the suture with a sharp tug, making him wince. "Good," she said, standing up and packing her kit with aggressive speed. "Because I don't date clients. It's bad for business." Chapter 11. They waited until nightfall. The mine was pitch black, save for the blue glow of the burner phone Rhea had activated. "Are you sure about this?" Rhea asked. She held the cheap plastic phone like it was a live grenade. "If Kale is compromised, this call pins us to a grid coordinate." "General Kale is my blood brother," Darius said, leaning against the rock wall. His bandaged arm was in a sling Rhea had fashioned from his torn shirt. "He would die before betraying me. He is the only one who can mobilize the Iron Guard." Rhea didn't look convinced, but she dialed the number. She put it on speaker. It rang once, twice. "Speak," a voice answered. It was deep, gravelly, and tight. "The sun sets in the west," Darius said, using the code phrase. There was a pause, a beat of silence that lasted too long. "But the wolf hunts at dawn," Kale's voice replied. The countersign was correct. "Sire, is that you? The news said—" "I am alive," Darius interrupted. "I need extraction. Sector 4, near the old mines. Bring a strike team. Only men you trust." "Thank the gods," Kale exhaled. I will come myself. Stay where you are. I'll be there in 1 hour. Do not move." Kale out. The line went dead. Darius let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for days. See? Loyalty still exists. Rhea was staring at the phone, her brow furrowed. She tapped the screen, pulling up an audio analysis app she had running in the background. "Look at the waveform," she said, turning the screen to him. Darius squinted at the jagged green lines. "I am a king, not a sound engineer. What am I looking at?" "This is a voice stress analysis," Rhea explained. "See these micro tremors in the frequency? High stress. Deception markers." "He just found out his king is alive. Of course he is stressed." "No," Rhea shook her head. "It's the pause, before he gave the countersign. And the background noise. Listen to the recording again. She played back the audio, boosting the background gain. But the wolf hunts at dawn. Behind Cale's voice, faint but distinct, was a rhythmic, mechanical beeping. Beep, beep, beep. Rhea looked at Darius. That's a heart monitor. He's not at the barracks. He's in a hospital wing. Or a torture chamber. Darius's face hardened. If he is hurt. He's compromised, Rhea said, crushing the burner phone under her boot to destroy the SIM card. He told us to stay where we are 3 times. He didn't ask if you were injured. He didn't ask who was with you. He was reading a script. She looked toward the tunnel entrance. They're not sending a rescue team, Darius. They're sending a hit squad. And thanks to that call, they know exactly where we are. Chapter 12. We need to move, Rhea said, hoisting her bag. And we need to stop running. As long as we're reacting, we're losing. We have no vehicle, Darius pointed out. He walked over to the Audi. It sat in the dark tunnel, a beautiful, broken thing. And I refuse to walk back to the capital. We aren't walking. We're trading up. Rhea opened the driver's side door of the Audi and popped the glove box. She pulled out the vehicle's registration and title, which were held under one of her untraceable shell companies. There's a contact I know, Rhea said. About 10 miles east of here, an underground fence. He specializes in hot items. He won't care who you are, only what you have. They hiked through the woods, avoiding the roads. It took them 3 hours. Darius moved with surprising stealth for a man of his size, though the lack of food was starting to slow him down again. Pip rode on Darius's shoulder, occasionally chittering into his ear, acting as an extra set of eyes. They arrived at a dilapidated salvage yard, surrounded by a corrugated metal fence topped with razor wire. A sign read, "Sal's Scrap and Salvage. Keep out or get shot." Rhea didn't knock. She picked the lock on the side gate and slipped inside, motioning for Darius to follow. They navigated through a maze of crushed cars and rusted machinery until they reached a lit warehouse in the center. Rhea banged on the metal shutter. "Sal! Open up! It's Rhea!" A moment later, a viewing slot slid open. A pair of suspicious eyes peered out. "You're dead," a gravelly voice said. "Saw it on TV. You killed the king." "He's not dead, and I didn't kill him," Rhea said. "I have a trade. A 2025 Audi RS6 Avant, silver, minimal body damage." Darius choked back a cough at minimal. "The cops are looking for a silver wagon," Sal said. "It's heat." "It's an RS6, Sal. Twin-turbo V8. Parts alone are worth 50 grand. It's parked in the Blackwood mine." The slot slid shut. Locks tumbled. The heavy door rolled up. Sal was a dwarf, thick-set and covered in grease. He looked at Rhea, then at the towering, blood-stained figure behind her. "Who's the giant?" Sal asked. "My bodyguard," Rhea lied smoothly. "Look, Sal, I need something that runs, something invisible, and something that can hit a wall without crumpling, and I need it now." Sal grunted, wiping his hands on a rag. He gestured to the back of the warehouse. "I got a 1998 Ford F-250, diesel, lifted suspension. Rust on the wheel wells, but the engine is bulletproof. Literally. Previous owner was a paranoid doomsday prepper. Plated the doors with Kevlar." Rhea walked over to the truck. It was ugly, painted a peeling matte brown, with a heavy steel bull bar on the front. It looked like a tank, disguised as a farm truck. "We'll take it," Rhea said. "Throw in a full tank of diesel and 2 shotguns, and you can keep the Audi." Sal spat on the floor. "Deal. But if the cops come asking, I never saw you." Darius ran his hand along the dented fender of the truck. "It is hideous," he observed. "It's perfect," Rhea said, climbing into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life with a clattering, aggressive thrum that shook the floor. "Get in, Your Highness. We're going to war." Chapter 13. The Ford F-250, a rusted behemoth of matte brown steel, rumbled to a halt a mile from General Kale's estate. The engine block ticked as it cooled, the only sound in the pre-dawn silence. Rhea killed the lights. "We walk from here." She checked the load on the pump-action Mossberg shotgun Sal had thrown in. It was an ugly weapon, the stock taped with electrical tape, but the action cycled with a reassuring clack, clack. She handed the second shotgun to Darius. "Can you shoot one-handed?" she asked, eyeing his makeshift sling. "I can shoot with my teeth if required," Darius grunted, taking the weapon. He looked like a nightmare, a towering figure in shredded, bloodied formal wear, missing a sleeve, his left arm bound tight against his chest. They moved through the perimeter woods. The estate was a fortress, 12-foot walls, floodlights, and patrols. But Rhea knew the architecture. Kale was a traditionalist. He used the old aqueduct system for irrigation. "Drainage pipe," Rhea whispered, pointing to a grate obscured by overgrown ivy. "It leads to the cellar." She used the crowbar from the truck to pry the grate loose. The screech of metal on stone made Darius wince, but no alarm sounded. They slipped inside. The tunnels were damp and smelled of mold and subterranean decay. Pip, the otter, rode on Darius's good shoulder, his whiskers twitching as he acted as a proximity alarm. They breached the cellar door, emerging into the silent hallway of the manor. It was too quiet. A general's house should have guards, movement, life. This felt like a mausoleum. "Main office," Darius whispered. "Second floor." They swept the house, moving tactical style. Rhea took point, her shotgun raised. Darius covered the rear, his massive frame filling the corridor. When they reached the double doors of the study, Rhea didn't knock. She kicked the door open, sweeping the room. "Clear," she said, lowering the barrel. Darius stepped past her. General Kale was sitting at his desk, his back to them, staring out the window at the moonlit grounds. "Kale," Darius said, relief washing over his voice. "We are here. We need the extraction team." The general didn't turn. Darius stepped closer, reaching out to touch his friend's shoulder. "Brother?" The chair swiveled slowly, unbalanced by the touch. General Kale slumped forward. His throat had been opened with surgical precision, the blood long dried on his uniform. A small speaker was taped to the underside of his desk, the source of the heartbeat Rhea had heard. "He's been dead for hours," Rhea said, her voice hollow. Darius stared at the corpse of his oldest friend, the man he had trusted with his life. The boulder on his shoulders didn't just get heavier, it crushed him. He made a sound, a low, guttural vibration of pure grief. "It was a recording," Darius whispered. "They lured us here." "Not just us," Rhea said, seeing a shadow move across the lawn outside the window. "Look." Darius looked. The floodlights snapped on, blindingly bright. Chapter 14. "Come out, cousin. The game is over." Lord Malacor's voice boomed from a megaphone, amplified and distorted. Rhea ducked below the windowsill, dragging Darius down with her. Glass shattered as a sniper round punched through the pane, embedding itself in the mahogany bookshelf where Darius's head had been a second ago. "We are burned," Rhea hissed. Exits? Only the front, Darius snarled. His grief had instantly transmuted into a cold, volcanic rage. I am going to kill him. There are 20 men out there, Rhea countered. You'll die before you reach the steps. Then I die a king. Darius stood up. He didn't check his shotgun. He dropped it. He began to unbutton the few remaining shreds of his shirt. Darius, no, Rhea warned, realizing what he was doing. Your arm, the injury. The wolf does not need a sling. He threw his head back and roared. It wasn't a human sound. It was the sound of tectonic plates shifting. The change took him. It was violent and visceral. His bones cracked audibly, reshaping with sickening pops. His jaw elongated, teeth sharpening into obsidian daggers. The ruined trousers and shirt didn't just tear. They disintegrated under the expansion of muscle and fur. In 10 seconds, the man was gone. In his place stood a midnight wolf, a creature the size of a draft horse, with fur as black as a void and eyes like burning coals. The bandage on his foreleg was gone, replaced by a jagged pink scar on the fur where the glass had been. He didn't look at Rhea. He crashed through the French doors, shattering the wood and glass, and leaped onto the balcony. Malachor stood on the lawn, flanked by 3 massive gray wolves, his elite guard. Darius launched himself off the balcony. He landed in the center of the lawn, the impact shaking the ground. The 3 gray wolves surged forward. It was a massacre. Darius, fueled by the death of his friend, was a blur of violence. He caught the first wolf midair, his jaws clamping over its spine. Crunch. He tossed the carcass aside like a rag doll. But the injury slowed him. As he turned to face the second wolf, his left leg buckled slightly. The third wolf, a cunning, scarred male, lunged for his throat. Darius twisted, but not fast enough. The enemy wolf's teeth sank into his shoulder, right where the glass wound had been. Darius roared in pain, thrashing to dislodge the attacker. Now, Malachor shouted to his archers. Silver! Rhea, watching from the balcony, saw the glint of silver arrowheads. She reached into her satchel. She had 1 explosive charge left. Eat this, she muttered. She grabbed a bottle of high-proof brandy from Kale's liquor cabinet, jammed the explosive putty onto the neck, and set the timer for 3 seconds. She hurled the bottle over the railing. It exploded in midair above the archers. The alcohol vapor ignited, creating a massive fireball and a shockwave that knocked the gunmen off their feet. Darius, move! Rhea screamed. The giant black wolf, bleeding from the shoulder and dizzy from the new toxin coursing through him, shook off the attacker. He looked up at Rhea. Intelligence flashed in his beast eyes. He turned and sprinted, not toward the house, but toward the perimeter wall, smashing through the brickwork like a battering ram. Rhea vaulted off the balcony, landing in the bushes, and sprinted after the hole he had made. Chapter 15. The drainage tunnels under the city were a labyrinth of concrete and dripping water. They were miles from the estate, deep in the subterranean infrastructure, where the homeless and the forgotten lived. Rhea found him in a storm overflow chamber. He had shifted back. The transformation had been forced, likely by the wolfsbane circulating in his system. He lay on the concrete, completely naked, his massive body shivering violently. Darius, Rhea whispered, dropping to her knees beside him. He looked terrible. His skin was gray, covered in a sheen of cold sweat. The bite mark on his shoulder was festering, the veins around it turning a web-like black. Cold, he mumbled, his teeth chattering. So cold. Rhea stripped off her leather jacket and draped it over his chest. It covered barely a third of him. She pulled off her tactical vest and laid that over his legs. "You were bitten," Rhea said, examining the wound. It smelled of rot and bitter almonds. "The wolf had coated teeth. It's a high dose." Darius's eyes rolled back, then snapped open. He wasn't seeing her. He was seeing ghosts. "Father?" he rasped, reaching a trembling hand toward the damp ceiling. "The boulder. It's slipping. I can't hold it." "Darius, stay with me. Look at me." Rhea grabbed his face, forcing him to focus. He blinked, his eyes unfocused and glassy. "Rhea, you must go." "I'm not going anywhere." "You don't understand," he gasped, his body convulsing as a fresh wave of fever hit him. "The madness. When the wolfsbane hits the brain, I will lose control. I will tear you apart. Run. Leave me here." He tried to push her away, but his strength was gone. His hand slipped off her arm and hit the concrete with a wet slap. "I am a weapon," he slurred, tears leaking from his eyes. "A broken weapon. Don't let me kill you." "You're not going to kill me," Rhea said firmly, though her heart hammered against her ribs. She checked his pulse. It was erratic, thready. He had an hour, maybe less, before his heart stopped or his mind broke permanently. "I need to get the antidote," she said, standing up. "Pip, stay with him. Bite him if he tries to sleep." The otter chirped sadly and curled up against Darius's neck, offering his body heat. "Don't go," Darius whispered, his voice fading. "Don't leave me alone in the dark." "I'll be back," Rhea promised, checking the load in her pistol. "And I'm bringing the light." Chapter 16. Rhea emerged from a manhole cover in the alleyway behind the mortar and pestle. It was 3 a.m. The shop, a dusty apothecary in the old quarter, was closed. She didn't knock. She used the hilt of her ceramic knife to shatter the glass of the back door, reached in and unlocked it. The shop smelled of dried sage and questionable legality. "Who's there?" A voice croaked from the back room. An elderly woman with cataracts and a shotgun stepped out. "It's Rhea Valeria," Rhea said, keeping her hands visible. "I need monkshood, silver nitrate, and adrenaline. Now." The old woman lowered the gun. "Valeria, you're on the news. There's a bounty on your head the size of the national debt." "Then you can collect it after I leave," Rhea snapped. "I have a patient dying of wolfsbane concentrate. I need the stash you keep under the floorboards. The strong stuff." The woman hesitated, then spat on the floor. "Cash only." "I don't have that kind of cash," Rhea said, stepping forward. "But I have a marker. You owe me for the job in Barcelona." The woman cursed, but she lowered the gun completely. She hobbled behind the counter and pried up a loose floorboard. She produced a small vial of iridescent blue liquid and a syringe. "Synthesized angel's trumpet mixed with adrenaline," the woman said. "It'll jumpstart an elephant's heart or kill a man instantly. 50-50 chance." "I'll take those odds." Rhea grabbed the vial. "If he survives," the woman called out as Rhea sprinted for the door. "Tell him he owes me a pardon." Rhea made it back to the storm drain in 20 minutes. Darius was thrashing. The fever had reached the critical stage. He was snarling, his fingernails scraping grooves into the concrete. Pip was chittering frantically from atop a pipe out of reach. "Darius!" Rhea shouted. He roared, a sound that was half man, half wolf. He lunged at her, his eyes pure black pools of madness. Rhea didn't retreat. She dodged his clumsy swing, ducked under his massive arm, and tackled him. It was like tackling a bear, but he was weak. She pinned his shoulders to the ground, straddling his chest. He snapped at her, his teeth clicking inches from her face. "Stay still, you stubborn royal ass!" she yelled. She uncapped the syringe with her teeth. Darius bucked, throwing her off balance. She clamped her legs tighter around his torso, grabbed a handful of his beard to immobilize his head, and jammed the needle into his neck, right into the jugular. She depressed the plunger. Darius stiffened. His back arched off the concrete, his mouth opening in a silent scream. His veins bulged, turning from black to angry red, then slowly fading to normal. He collapsed back onto the floor, gasping for air. Rhea slumped on top of him, exhausted. For a long minute, the only sound was their ragged breathing and the drip of water. Darius blinked. The blackness faded from his eyes, leaving them dark, brown, and human. He looked up at Rhea, who was still sitting on his bare chest, her hair wild, her tactical tank top soaked with sweat and sewer water. He reached up, his hand trembling, and touched her cheek. His skin was cooling. "You came back," he whispered, his voice full of wonder. "I told you," Rhea said, leaning her forehead against his sternum. "I'm security. I don't leave the package." Chapter 17. The storm drain smelled of wet concrete, iron rust, and the faintest hint of the ocean, saltwater backwash from the harbor above. It was a cold, permeating dampness that settled into the marrow. Rhea sat against the curved wall, her arms wrapped tight around her chest. She had stopped shivering 10 minutes ago, which she knew was a bad sign. Hypothermia was creeping in. She had stripped off her heavy leather jacket and her tactical vest to cover the massive, shivering form of the king beside her, leaving her in just a soaked black tank top and cargo pants. Darius groaned. The sound was deep, resonating off the tunnel walls. He opened his eyes. The madness was gone. The inky blackness that had consumed his irises during the fever had receded, leaving behind the dark, intelligent brown she recognized. He blinked, taking in the grim surroundings, the trickle of dirty water, the scurrying rats, and the small, fierce woman freezing to death next to him. "Rhea?" His voice was a wreck, scraping like sandpaper over stone. "You're alive," she whispered, her teeth chattering uncontrollably. "Good. I didn't want to drag your corpse out of here." Darius pushed himself up on one elbow. The leather jacket slid off his chest. He looked down at himself, naked, scarred, and filthy, and then at her. He realized instantly what she had done. She had given him her armor. "You are freezing," he rumbled. "I'm fine, just tactical temperature adjustment." Darius didn't argue. He reached out, his hand engulfing her upper arm. His skin was burning hot, the metabolic furnace of an alpha healing at accelerated speeds. With a strength that belied his condition, he yanked her toward him. "Get under," he ordered, lifting the heavy leather jacket like a wing. "Darius, Body heat. Survival protocol. Do not argue with the king." Rhea didn't have the energy to fight. She crawled into the space beside him, pressing her back against his chest. He draped the leather jacket and the thick tactical vest over both of them, creating a cocoon of warmth. The contact was electric. His skin was like a radiator. Rhea felt the heat seeping into her frozen limbs, painful at first, then blissful. Darius wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her flush against him. His chin rested on the top of her wet, messy head. For a long time, they didn't speak. Pip, sensing the warmth, squeezed his way between them, curling up against Darius's stomach. "You stayed," Darius murmured into her hair. He sounded genuinely baffled. I told you to run. I shifted. I could have torn you apart. I don't run on fear, Rhea mumbled, sleep dragging at her eyelids. I run on results. Darius tightened his grip. The boulder on his shoulders felt lighter in the dark. He wasn't the king here. He was just a man keeping a woman warm in the mud. You are no longer an employee, Rhea, he whispered, pressing a kiss to her temple. You are something else. Chapter 18. Rhea woke up to the smell of burnt cedar. It took her a second to realize she was using the king's pectoral muscle as a pillow. She scrambled away, checking her watch. 8 a.m. Sunlight was filtering through the grate above, slicing through the gloom. Darius was already awake. He was sitting up, the leather jacket draped over his lap for modesty, examining the healing bite on his shoulder. The flesh was pink and new, the infection burned out by the antidote. We need to move, Rhea said, standing up and shaking out her stiff limbs. She felt grimy, but warm. Malachor will have the city locked down. I cannot walk out of here naked, Darius noted dryly. Unless you wish to distract the guards with scandal. I scavenged while you were snoring. Rhea kicked a bundle of cloth she had retrieved from a maintenance locker near the exit. City sanitation coveralls. It was the only thing in your size. Or close to your size. Darius held up the bright orange jumpsuit. He looked at it with profound disdain. I am to reclaim my kingdom dressed as a traffic cone? It's orange or nothing, Your Highness. Darius sighed and pulled the jumpsuit on. It was tight across the shoulders and the legs ended at his shins, but it covered him. He looked ridiculous and terrifying all at once, a giant convict who could snap a neck with one hand. The plan, Darius said, zipping the front. Malachor thinks I am dead. He will move up the coronation. He'll want to cement his rule quickly, Rhea agreed, checking her pistol. She had 4 rounds left. We need an army. You said the outskirts packs were loyal to your father? They are traditionalists, Darius said. They hate the court politics. But they respect strength. If I show up alive, they might follow me. But we are 20 miles from the city limits, and we have no transport. My car, Rhea said. The Audi. You left it in the mine, Darius reminded her. It is out of fuel and broken. It's an RS6, Darius. It's built like a tank. And mines have diesel generators. If we can get to the mine, we can refuel it. And how do we get to the mine? Rhea pointed upward to the grate. The coal freight runs at 9 a.m. It passes right by the Blackwood Ridge. We catch a ride. Chapter 19. The coal train ride was loud, dirty, and miserable. They jumped off as the train slowed for the bend near the Blackwood mine, rolling into the dry grass. Darius stood up, dusting coal dust off his orange jumpsuit. I have slept in sewers and jumped from moving trains. My biography will be a tragedy. Or an adventure novel, Rhea said. Come on. They hiked up the ridge to the mine entrance. The tunnel mouth gaped dark and silent, but the Audi wasn't alone. 3 men were huddled around the silver station wagon. They were scavengers, meth heads from the valley looking for copper wire and catalytic converters. One of them was currently taking a tire iron to the Audi's rear window. Hey! Rhea shouted. The men spun around. They saw a small woman in tactical gear and a giant man in a bright orange jumpsuit. Get lost! The one with the tire iron yelled. We found it first! Darius didn't speak. He just started walking toward them. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He just walked with the heavy, predatory gait of an apex predator. The scavengers exchanged looks. The biggest one pulled a knife. I said back off, freak! Darius caught the knife hand mid-swing. There was a sickening crack as he squeezed. The scavenger screamed, dropping the blade. Darius headbutted him. A simple, brutal motion. The man crumpled. The other two looked at Darius, then at the unconscious man, and dropped their tools. They ran down the mountain faster than the Audi ever could. "The paint is scratched," Darius observed, inspecting the car. "It adds character," Rhea said. She popped the fuel cap. "I'll siphon the small portable gasoline generator in the tool shed. You check the tires." 20 minutes later, the Audi RS6 Avant coughed to life. The engine sounded rough, but the twin-turbo V8 settled into a steady idle. The windshield was still a spiderweb of cracks on the passenger side, and the front bumper was missing entirely, giving the car a snarling, skeletal grin. Darius sat in the passenger seat, his knees pressed against the dashboard. He patted the leather. "Hello, beast. Did you miss us?" Rhea revved the engine. Next stop, the outskirts. Chapter 20. The Badlands were a desolate stretch of rocky terrain north of the capital. This was where the wild packs lived. Werewolves who rejected the suits and technology of the court for a life of hunting and isolation. The battered silver Audi tore up the dirt track, dust billowing in its wake. Rhea parked in the center of the settlement, a collection of yurts and cabins. Immediately, they were surrounded. 24 wolves in human form emerged from the structures. They were rough, scarred, and armed with crude axes and rifles. A massive man with a gray beard and a wolf pelt cloak stepped forward. Alpha Taurian. He looked at the dusty Audi, then at Rhea, and finally at Darius, who unfolded himself from the passenger seat in his tight orange jumpsuit. Taurian threw his head back and laughed. "By the moon! Is this a joke?" The king returns, dressed like a garbage man, driving a broken wagon. The pack laughed with him. Darius didn't flinch. He walked to the center of the circle. "I am Darius Valerius, and I am here to call in the blood debt you owed my father." Taurian stopped laughing. He stepped closer, sniffing the air. "You smell of sickness and human," he sneered. "You are weak, boy. Why should I follow a king who cannot even dress himself?" "Because," Rhea's voice cut through the tension. She was standing on the hood of the Audi. In her hand, she held a small black device, a laser pointer she kept in her kit for Pip. She aimed the red dot squarely at the center of Taurian's forehead. "Because," Rhea continued, her voice calm and amplified by the silence, "that is a laser designator for a Predator drone currently circling at 5,000 feet. I have a Hellfire missile locked onto your skull. If the king gives the signal, this entire valley becomes a crater." Taurian froze. He looked at the red dot dancing between his eyes. He looked up at the sky. It was clear blue, but drones were invisible at that altitude. He looked at Darius. "Is she serious?" Darius crossed his arms, his biceps straining the orange fabric. He looked every inch the king, despite the jumpsuit. "She is my head of security. She does not bluff." Taurian swallowed. The old wolf knew when he was outmatched. He dropped his axe. "The pack is yours, my king," Taurian grunted, kneeling in the dust. One by one, the other wolves knelt. Darius looked at Rhea. She winked and clicked off the laser pointer. "Competence," Darius whispered to himself, a small smile touching his lips. Chapter 21. The Badlands were silent, save for the wind howling through the rocky crags. Rhea slept in the passenger seat of the Audi RS6, her ceramic knife still strapped to her thigh, her hand resting near the holster of her pistol. Darius was sprawled in the back seat, his massive frame folded uncomfortably into the leather, the bright orange jumpsuit glowing faintly in the moonlight. Pip, the otter, was curled on the dashboard, acting as the sentry. At 4 a.m., the world exploded. A Molotov cocktail shattered against the rear driver's side window, the one already weakened by the scavenger's tire iron. The glass blew inward, showering Darius with shards and liquid fire. "Ambush!" Rhea screamed, already moving. She kicked her door open and rolled out into the dust, drawing her pistol. The settlement was in chaos. Shadows were moving between the yurts. Not Torian's men, but mercenaries. Malicor's elite death squads. "We are compromised!" Darius roared, kicking the rear door open. He tumbled out, the orange jumpsuit smoldering on the left shoulder. He patted the flames out with a grimace. "Torian sold us out?" Darius snarled, his eyes flashing amber. "No!" Rhea yelled, firing 2 rounds at a silhouette sprinting toward them. The target dropped. "Torian thinks I have a drone. This is someone else. Someone who wanted the bounty more than safety." A young wolf, one of the teenagers from the pack, stepped out from behind a yurt, pointing a trembling finger. "He's there! The usurper! I called them!" Darius didn't even look at the boy. He looked at the 3 armored SUVs tearing through the settlement's perimeter fence. "Get back in the car!" Rhea ordered. She turned to grab the kit, her battered leather satchel sitting in the footwell of the passenger seat. It contained her life, the antidotes, the toxin analyzer, the tools of her trade. Another Molotov sailed through the air. It didn't hit the car, it hit the open passenger door. The interior was instantly engulfed. The leather satchel caught fire immediately, the chemicals inside hissing and popping. "My gear!" Rhea lunged for it. "Leave it!" Darius grabbed the back of her tactical vest and hauled her away just as an erratic pop, pop, pop signaled the spare ammunition in the bag cooking off. Rhea watched her livelihood burn for a split second. The litmus strips, the expensive analyzer, the duct tape. Gone. "Pip!" she shrieked. The otter, terrified by the flames, launched himself from the dashboard, landing on Rhea's shoulder. She clutched him tight. "Drive!" Darius shoved her toward the driver's side. They scrambled in. Rhea hit the ignition. The V8 roared, drowning out the gunfire. She slammed the car into reverse, crushing a wooden fence, and spun the wheel. The Audi, now missing a bumper, possessed spider-webbed glass and possessed a scorched interior, launched itself forward. They tore out of the settlement, leaving the burning yurts and the traitorous boy behind. Rhea checked the rearview mirror. The armored SUVs were turning to follow. "I lost the kit," Rhea said, her voice tight. She wasn't looking at Darius. She was staring at the road, her knuckles white. "I have no analyzer, no antidotes, just the gun, the knife, and the otter." "You have the king," Darius said, leaning forward between the seats. "And we are going to the capital." Chapter 22. The sun was rising over the capital city of Valeria, casting long golden shadows over the steel and glass skyline. The Audi RS6 sat idling in an alleyway 3 miles from the city gates. The engine was making a concerning knocking sound, and the smell of burnt leather from the passenger seat was overpowering. "We can't drive in," Rhea said, stripping the magazine from her pistol. She checked the load. 2 bullets left. She had fired 2 at the camp. Facial recognition grid is active at all toll booths, and this car looks like it went through a blender. "Then we walk," Darius said. He tried to smooth down the front of his orange sanitation jumpsuit. It was hopeless. He looks like a radioactive traffic cone. "I will simply blend in." "You're 6'6" and orange," Rhea pointed out. "You don't blend. You beacon." She looked at a manhole cover a few feet away. Steam was rising from it. Darius followed her gaze. His face fell. "No." "It leads directly to the sub-basement of the palace," Rhea said, holstering her weapon. "I studied the blueprints for the wedding security." "Rhea," Darius pleaded, "I am the king. Kings do not crawl through excrement twice in 1 week." "Dead kings don't crawl anywhere. Malicor is being crowned at noon." We have 4 hours. She used the tire iron from the trunk to pry the cover open. The smell hit them. A thick, cloying wall of rot and sewage. Darius gagged. I hate you. I want it on the record. I absolutely loathe you. Noted, Rhea said, and dropped into the hole. The trek was a nightmare. The tunnels were narrower than the storm drains, forcing Darius to hunch his massive shoulders. Slime coated the walls. Rats, the size of cats, watched them from the pipes. Rhea moved with efficient grimness, checking junctions against a mental map, while Pip rode on top of her head to stay dry. Darius waited behind her, the orange jumpsuit soaking up the filth until it turned a brownish rust color. He muttered curses in 3 different languages, promising to execute the city planner who designed this system. Quiet, Rhea hissed, holding up a hand. They stopped beneath a vertical shaft. Light filtered down from a grate far above. We're under the palace kitchens, Rhea whispered. This is it. She climbed the rusted iron ladder. The grate was heavy, but she pushed it up just enough to peek. Clear, she signaled. They climbed out, emerging into a dry storage pantry stacked high with flour sacks. Darius pulled himself up, dripping muck onto the pristine tile floor. He looked at himself. The jumpsuit was ruined, torn at the seams, stained with sewage and grease. He smelled like a landfill. He looked at Rhea. She had a smear of grime across her cheek, but her eyes were bright, dangerous. You look terrible, Rhea whispered, suppressing a smile. I look like vengeance, Darius corrected, wiping sludge from his beard. Vengeance that needs a shower. Showtime, Your Highness. Chapter 23. The great hall of the palace was a sea of velvet, silk, and hypocrisy. 500 nobles stood in hushed reverence as Lord Malachor ascended the dais toward the obsidian throne. He wore a suit of crushed midnight velvet and a cape lined with ermine. He looked regal, polished, and utterly triumphant. The high priest held the iron crown, the heavy, jagged circlet that marked the Alpha King. Do you, Malachor Valerius, claim this throne by right of blood and strength? The priest intoned. I do, Malachor said, his voice smooth as oil. And I vow to protect this pack from the weakness that plagued my predecessor. Then let the coronation be sealed. Boom! The heavy double doors at the back of the hall didn't just open. They were kicked off their hinges. One door flew inward, crashing into a table of hors d'oeuvres. The music cut out instantly. 500 heads turned. Standing in the doorway was a nightmare. It was Darius. But not the polished king they remembered. He was a towering, filthy monster. He wore a shredded, sewage-stained orange jumpsuit that clung to his muscles like a second skin. His feet were bare and caked in mud. His shaved head was streaked with grease, but it was his eyes that terrified them. They burned with a cold, absolute fury. Next to him stood a small human woman in tactical gear, a ceramic knife in her hand and a pistol on her hip. An otter sat on her shoulder, chittering aggressively at a duchess. I object, Darius roared. His voice was raw power, filling the cavernous room without a microphone. The silence was absolute. You could hear a pin drop. Or a jaw. Darius? Malachor whispered, his face draining of color. You're dead. I saw the report, the wolfsbane. Darius began to walk down the center aisle. The nobles parted like the Red Sea, terrified of touching the filth, terrified of the man. You tried to poison me, Darius shouted, each step a hammer blow. You tried to shoot me. You hunted me with mercenaries. You buried me in a mine. You chased me through the sewers." He stopped at the base of the dais, looking up at his cousin. "But you made one mistake, Malachor. You didn't finish the job." Malachor recovered his wits. He snapped his fingers. "Guards, seize him! He is an impostor, a madman!" The royal guard, 20 elite soldiers in ceremonial armor, hesitated. They looked at Malachor, then at Darius. They smelled the alpha pheromones rolling off the giant in the orange jumpsuit. "Stand down," Darius commanded the guards. He didn't shout it. He said it with the quiet authority of a man who owns the building. "Or I will rip your spines out and use them as toothpicks." The guards didn't move. They lowered their halberds. Malachor looked around, panic setting in. He realized he was losing the room. He needed leverage. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small remote detonator. "Stop!" Malachor screamed, his voice cracking. "Or I detonate the charges!" Chapter 24. Darius froze. Rhea raised her pistol, aiming squarely at Malachor's chest. "What charges?" Rhea demanded, her voice steady. Malachor smirked, though sweat was beading on his forehead. He pressed a button on the armrest of the throne. A massive screen descended from the ceiling behind him, usually used for propaganda speeches. The screen flickered to life. It showed a live feed of a cell. Inside, huddled together, were 3 people: an older man, a woman, and a teenage girl. They were gagged and bound to chairs. Strapped to their chests were blocks of C4 explosives. Rhea's breath hitched. She recognized them instantly. It wasn't her family. She had no family. They died years ago. It was Darius's family. His younger sister, Alara, and her 2 children, the ones Darius had sent away for safety years ago. Malachor had found them. "The Princess Alara," Malachor sneered, "and your niece and nephew. The explosives are linked to this remote. If my heart stops, they die. If you take another step, they die." The court gasped. Using children as shields was a violation of the deepest pack laws. Darius went still. The rage vanished, replaced by a terrifying coldness. "Let them go, Malachor. This is between us." "No," Malachor laughed, regaining his confidence. "This is how it works. You are soft, Darius. You care too much. That is why you failed." He turned his gaze to Rhea. "And you, the human pet. You have a gun. I have a proposition." Malachor pointed at Darius. "Kill him. Put a bullet in his brain. Do it, and I let the children live. Refuse, and I blow them up right now." Rhea's hand didn't tremble. She looked at Darius. He was staring at the screen, at his sister's terrified eyes. He looked back at Rhea. "Do it," Darius whispered. "Save them." "How touching," Malachor mocked. "The loyal dog obeys her master." Rhea turned her body. She leveled the pistol at Darius's heart. "I'm sorry, Your Highness," she said loudly, for the whole room to hear. "I don't get paid enough for this." Darius closed his eyes, accepting his fate. Rhea tightened her finger on the trigger. She exhaled, shifting her aim by 3 degrees upward and 2 degrees to the right. She wasn't aiming at Darius. She was aiming past him. Bang! The shot echoed like a cannon blast. Darius flinched, waiting for the impact. It didn't come. Above Malachor's head, the massive crystal chandelier, a 2-ton monstrosity of iron and glass, groaned. Rhea's bullet had severed the main retaining chain. Malachor looked up just as gravity took over. Oh, shit! The chandelier crashed down. It didn't hit Malachor directly. Rhea's angle was precise, but it smashed into the dais, shattering into a million razor-sharp fragments and pinning Malachor's legs under the twisted iron frame. The remote flew from his hand, skittering across the marble floor. "Get the remote!" Rhea screamed, kicking her pistol deep under a banquet table where no guard could reach it before drawing her ceramic knife. Darius didn't need to be told twice. He lunged. Chapter 25. The remote detonator skittered across the polished marble floor, spinning like a top before coming to a rest 10 feet from the dais. It was a small black box, innocuous in appearance, but it held the lives of 3 people. "Get it!" Malachor screamed, his voice strangled as the 2-ton chandelier pressed his legs into the stone. "Someone get the remote!" Chaos erupted. The 20 royal guards, previously hesitant, were now faced with a direct command from a man who was technically still crowned. 3 of them broke rank, surging toward the device. "No!" Darius roared, lunging forward. He was fast, faster than a human, faster than a man of his size should be, but he was unarmed and barefoot. He tackled the first guard, sending the armored soldier flying into a pillar with a sickening crunch of metal on stone. Rhea moved like a shadow. She didn't go for the guards. She went for the remote. She slid across the floor, her ceramic knife held in a reverse grip. A second guard swung a halberd at her. She ducked under the blade, slashing his hamstring with surgical precision. He fell with a cry. Rhea scrambled forward, her fingers inches from the black box. "Die, traitor!" Lady Vieira, the forgotten bride, emerged from the crowd of screaming nobles. She wasn't holding a dagger this time. She was holding a heavy silver candelabra. She swung it with hysterical strength. It connected with Rhea's shoulder, sending a shockwave of pain down her arm. Rhea hissed, rolling away as the heavy silver crashed into the floor where her head had been. "Pip!" Rhea yelled. The otter, who had been clinging to her tactical vest, launched himself. He latched onto Vieira's ankle, biting down hard. Vieira shrieked and kicked, sending the small creature tumbling across the floor. "Pip!" Rhea scrambled up, ignoring her throbbing shoulder. Darius was struggling under the sheer weight of numbers. 5 armored guards had dogpiled him, using their heavy shields to pin his limbs against the marble. He roared, throwing them off like rag dolls, but they kept coming. He was fighting not to kill, but to reach the remote. "Archer!" Malachor wheezed from under the wreckage. "Shoot him! Shoot the king!" High in the gallery, a lone marksman, one of Malachor's mercenaries, stepped out from the shadows. He drew a compound bow. The arrow nocked was not steel. It was pure silver, gleaming deadly in the palace lights. He aimed at Darius's heart. Darius was grappling with 2 guards, his back exposed. He didn't see the archer. Rhea did. She saw the glint of the silver tip. She calculated the trajectory. Darius was too far away to push. She was too far away to tackle the archer. The remote was still on the floor. Time seemed to slow down. The silence of the impending shot drowned out the screams of the court. Rhea didn't think. She didn't plan. She simply acted on an instinct she had buried for 20 years. An instinct she had lied about, medicated, and hidden under layers of gunpowder and cynicism. Protect the Alpha. She sprinted, not toward the archer, but into the path of the arrow. The bowstring twanged. Mid-stride, Rhea's body convulsed. It wasn't the smooth, practiced shift of a warrior like Darius. It was a violent, desperate tear. Her tactical gear shredded. Her bones snapped and reformed in a millisecond of agony. Where a woman had been sprinting, a wolf lurched into existence. The transformation was ragged and incomplete, her fur matted and her gait uneven, but she threw her newfound weight forward with desperate, uncoordinated force. She leaped. The silver arrow, meant for Darius's heart, caught her in the midsection. The impact knocked her out of the air. She slammed into the marble floor, skidding to a halt at Darius's feet. A pained, high-pitched yelp echoed through the cavernous hall. Darius froze. He looked down. There, bleeding on the cold stone, was a small gray wolf with hazel eyes. The silver arrow was buried deep in her side, the flesh already sizzling. The entire room went silent. Darius stared at the wolf. He recognized the eyes. He recognized the scent. Gunpowder and honey, now mixed with the copper tang of blood. "Rhea?" he whispered. The wolf whined, nudging his bare foot with her nose before her head lolled back, her breathing shallow. Chapter 26. Something inside Darius broke. It wasn't a bone. It wasn't a promise. It was the leash. The invisible tether that held back the monster, the civilized restraints of a king who tried to rule by law, snapped with the violence of a suspension cable parting under tension. He looked at the small broken body of the wolf at his feet, the only thing that had stood between him and the abyss. The shield. A sound started deep in his chest. It wasn't a roar. It was lower, a subterranean vibration that shook the stained glass windows in their frames. He looked up at the gallery, at the archer who was knocking a second arrow. Darius didn't shift. He didn't need to. The beast was already at the controls. He moved with a speed that blurred the air. He grabbed the nearest guard by the throat. He didn't toss him aside this time. He squeezed. The sound of crushing windpipe was a wet crunch that sickened the stomach. He threw the body at the remaining guards like a projectile. "Kill them all," Darius whispered. It wasn't a command to an army. It was a permission slip to himself. He tore through the royal guard. A halberd swung at him. He caught the shaft, snapped the wood, and drove the splintered end into the attacker's chest. He was a hurricane of sewage-stained orange and raw violence. He reached the gallery support pillar. He didn't climb it. He punched it. The stone cracked. He hit it again and again, his knuckles splitting, his blood mixing with the dust. The pillar groaned and buckled. The archer in the gallery screamed as the structure collapsed, sending him tumbling to the floor below. Darius was on him before he stopped rolling. He didn't hesitate. He stomped on the man's chest, ending the threat with a finality that made the nobles avert their eyes. Then, Darius turned to the dais, to Malachor. Malachor was still pinned under the chandelier, watching the slaughter with eyes wide with terror. He fumbled for the remote, his fingers brushing the plastic casing. Darius walked toward him. He didn't run. He walked slowly, his bare feet leaving bloody prints on the white marble. "Darius, wait!" Malachor shrieked. "We can make a deal! The children!" Darius reached the dais. He looked down at his cousin. He looked at the remote. He bent down and picked up the black box. He held it up so Malachor could see it, then punched the master disarm code into the keypad. Only after the screen showed the link terminated signal did he crush the device with a casual flick of his thumb, shattering the plastic. The circuit board snapped. On the massive screen, the red lights on the C4 vests strapped to Alara and the children blinked and went out. Disarmed. Safe. Malachor sobbed with relief, thinking the violence was over. "See? We are family, Darius. You wouldn't—" Darius reached down, grabbing the mangled iron frame of the chandelier. With a grunt of bone-deep exertion, he leveraged his shoulder under the weight, heaving just enough to tilt the massive fixture so the jagged iron wasn't grinding further into Malicor's bone. Malicor sucked in a ragged, sobbing breath of air. "Thank you," he gasped. "Thank you, brother." Darius leaned in close. His eyes were pure black pools of void. "You are not my brother," Darius whispered. "You are a disease." Darius stepped back, withdrawing his support. Without his strength holding it, the 2-ton wreck of iron and crystal crashed back down. The crunch was final. Darius stood there for a moment in the silence. The king, covered in filth and blood, surrounded by broken bodies. He turned slowly. He walked back to the center of the room, to the small gray wolf lying in a pool of blood. He fell to his knees. He ignored the gasps of the court. He ignored the guards who were dropping their weapons in surrender. He scooped the small wolf into his arms, cradling her against his chest, heedless of the silver burning her flesh. Pip scrambled up onto his shoulder, chittering a mournful cry as Darius carried her out of the blood-stained hall. Chapter 27. The Royal Medical Wing. Smelled of antiseptic and lilies, a scent Darius now loathed. He sat in a stiff leather chair beside the bed, his elbows resting on his knees, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. He had been there for 3 days. He hadn't slept. He hadn't eaten. He had barely blinked. He was clean now. The sewage and blood had been scrubbed away, replaced by a fresh, crisp black suit his loyal valets had retrieved from the royal quarters once the palace was secured. But he felt filthy. He felt the weight of the boulder crushing him into the floor tiles. On the bed, Rhea Valyria lay still. She was human again. The shift had reversed when she lost consciousness. She looked smaller in the massive hospital bed, her skin pale against the white sheets. A thick bandage covered her midsection where the silver had been cut out. The doctors had said it was a miracle. The silver had missed her heart by millimeters. But the toxicity, the wolfsbane coating on the arrow, it was a gamble. "Your Majesty," a nurse whispered from the doorway. "Please, you must rest. The council is waiting." "Let them wait," Darius said, his voice a low growl. He didn't look up. "But sire, the coronation redo, the press." "Get out." The nurse fled. Darius reached out and took Rhea's hand. It was calloused, rough. A worker's hand. A fighter's hand. It felt cold. "You lied to me," Darius whispered to the unconscious woman. "You said you were human. You said you used tools because you were weak." He rubbed his thumb over her knuckles. "You were a dormant, a wolf who couldn't shift, with a body that heals as slowly and fragilely as a human's. You were rejected by our kind." He pieced it together now. The scent of wild honey, the way she tracked smells, the way she understood him. She hadn't been hiding a secret power. She had been hiding a disability. In their world, a wolf who couldn't shift was lower than a human, an outcast. "And you shifted," he murmured, his voice cracking. "For me. You broke your own bones to save a king who didn't even know what you were." A small movement caught his eye. On the pillow next to Rhea's head, Pip, the otter, stirred. The creature had refused to leave her side, biting anyone who tried to move him. He chirped softly, nudging Rhea's ear. Rhea's eyelids fluttered. Darius stopped breathing. He leaned forward, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. No, like a war drum. Her eyes opened. They were hazel, groggy and unfocused. She blinked, trying to process the light. She looked at the ceiling, then at Pip, Then, slowly, she turned her head to look at Darius. She swallowed dryly. Her voice was a rasp, barely audible. Did I get a bonus? Darius let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He pressed her hand to his forehead, closing his eyes as relief washed over him like a tidal wave. Yes, he whispered. You get a bonus. You get the whole treasury. Rhea tried to smile but winced. Too much paperwork. Just cover the medical bill. Done, Darius said, lifting his head to look at her. And the car repair. Good, Rhea sighed, her eyes drifting shut again. That bumper was expensive. Chapter 28. 2 weeks later. The balcony of the royal palace overlooked the city of Valeria. The sun was setting, painting the skyline in hues of gold and violet. The streets below were filled with cheering crowds. The return of King Darius, the wolf of the sewers, had become a legend instantly. The people loved a survivor. Darius stood at the railing. He wore a suit that cost more than a small country, tailored to perfection. But he wasn't wearing a tie. The top button of his shirt was undone. He heard the click of boots on the stone behind him. He turned. Rhea stood there. She looked different. She was wearing a dress, a deep, midnight blue silk that shimmered like water. It was elegant, formal, and completely at odds with the woman he knew. But then he looked down. On her thigh, strapped over the silk, was her ceramic knife. And on her feet, she wore heavy, reinforced combat boots. She walked over to him, leaning against the railing. She looked healthy, though she moved with a slight stiffness from the healing wound. You look ridiculous, Darius said, smiling. Protocol demanded a dress, Rhea shrugged. Security demanded the boots. I compromised. And the knife? For the fruit platter, obviously. Pitt poked his head out of her messy bun, which she had refused to style, and chittered at the sunset. Darius turned to face her. He reached out, tucking a loose strand of dark hair behind her ear. His touch was gentle, reverent. I suppose we both cleaned up well, Darius said, adjusting his pristine silk cuffs. Though I must admit, I missed the orange jumpsuit. It really brought out the wrongfully accused fugitive in my eyes, don't you think? Rhea smiled, the expression reaching her eyes for the first time since the wedding. The council wants to knight you, he said. Dame Rhea, savior of the crown. Hard pass, Rhea said. I'm a consultant. Knighthood implies I work for free. Then what do you want? Darius asked. You saved my life, my family, my throne. Name it. Rhea looked out at the city. She thought about the lonely apartment she had left, the years of hiding what she was, a broken wolf, a reject. She thought about the cold nights in the surveillance van. Then she looked at Darius, at the man who had slept in a sewer to stay close to her, the king who had rampaged through an army when she fell. I want a permanent contract, she said quietly. Darius raised an eyebrow. Security? Head of royal security, she corrected. Full autonomy, no questions asked when I blow up a gate. Granted, Darius said immediately. And, Rhea added, stepping closer, looking up into his eyes, I want to renegotiate the no dating clients clause. Darius's smile faded, replaced by a heat that made Rhea's breath hitch. He wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her flesh against him. He smelled of sea salt and burnt cedar. He smelled like home. I believe, Darius murmured, lowering his head to hers. That clause can be stricken from the record, by royal decree. He kissed her. It wasn't tentative. It was a seal, a promise, and a claim. It was the weapon and the shield finally locking into place. When they broke apart, breathless, Darius rested his forehead against hers. "The boulder," he whispered. "It is gone." Rhea smirked, tapping the knife on her thigh. "Good. I've already used the first installment of my bonus to pay off that apothecary in the old quarter. I don't like leaving markers unsettled." She paused, her eyes dancing. "Now, I have a new threat assessment." "Oh?" "Yeah, the council is boring me to death. Let's go drive the Audi fast." Darius laughed, a deep, booming sound that echoed over the city. "After you, my wolf." The end. Quick favor, don't go anywhere yet. If you thought Rhea was brave for tackling the Alpha King at his own wedding, wait until you meet the heroine in this next story on your screen. You have to hear this disaster unfold. Click the video on your screen right now. It is absolutely unhinged.